Okay, here we go. Good morning, everybody. That song is called Basin Street Blues. That was written by Spencer Williams in 1928, and it was recorded by Louis Armstrong the same year. Now, that was played on a horn, by the way, that was made in 1915. So we're talking about, 100-year-old stuff working out. Where do you go on television or on the internet? And you're going to watch an interview show, and the guy comes out and plays a song. Where do you go and hear this? Well, I'll tell you where. Life After Scientology, right here. And I'm Ron Miscavige. I'm your, as Tony Ortega would say, your proprietor. So good morning, everyone. And I have a very special guest and a very old friend of mine on this morning, which I absolutely guarantee you're going to love this show, because this gentleman is very astute. He's walked the walk. He's done things in Scientology that, you're going to see what he's done when I start the program and I start asking him some questions. Now, before I get into that, maybe you're wondering, why would you come on and play a trumpet on a show that you're going to take up a morbid subject? Well, I'll tell you why. Just because we're handling some suppressive group that's really harming a lot of people in society doesn't mean that we have to be morbid. We can still enjoy our lives. And music, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the more enjoyable things that you could listen to. And I hope you enjoy what I'm doing, and, send in your comments if you don't mind. But there's another thing you can do, and that is this. And this is going to get you out of the pocket of just being a viewer or somebody who spectates and listens to these shows. Do something about it. Now, I'm sure you've heard this said many times by me or by Mike Rinder on his blog. As a matter of fact, it's the logo for his blog. And maybe Tony Ortega has even said it. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll tell you what. The simplest thing you can do is tell other people, hey, you should watch this, Ron Miscavige's Life After Scientology. You can get educated and enlightened on a suppressive group. Or you could write to your senator or write to your congressman. Or watch Mike Rinder's blog. Something can be done about it. Or watch Tony Ortega and get other people to do it. Or you could become a Patreon. I mean, for $2, just that, you can say, hey, I'm doing something about it. So that kind of compartments it into those things that you're handling, rather than things that you're just worrying about and not doing anything. Now, I know that's long-winded, but I wanted to get that across to you, because I'd love if you did that and help us all in this endeavor that we're all doing to expose this group. Now, before we get started, though, there's a couple Patreons I'd like to mention, and one is Karen Cookson, and that's for $20, and I thank you very much. That's a new Patreon, and welcome to the club of Patreons. Okay, and then we have Jason Watson for $2. Thank you very much, Jason. Remember Sherlock Holmes? That's elementary, Dr. Watson. All right. And then Megan Jimenez for $9. And I thank you very much. Thank you very much for your help. Now, without any further words, or maybe a few more, I don't think so, though. It's the end of that. Please welcome my old friend and a great individual, Mike Rinder. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, my old friend Ron.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people know how old our friendship is.
Well, I met you in 1971, right?
Yep, at St. Hill with my parents.
And how many years is that?
Don't give me math questions this early in the morning on Sunday.
Okay, let's see. 71, 8.
9 minus 1 is 8. Like
Wait a minute.
going on 50 years.
That's 40 some years ago, right? Or about 40 years ago.
48 years ago.
48 years ago. Well, you're better at math than I was. I was going to say 91 years. All right.
And someone's going to come on and go, no, that's actually 38.
Right. Okay. So that's the first time we met. And just as a little insight, and of course you remember this because we talked about it before the show, outside of the qualifications division where you would get your auditing if you're a public, or the HCC rather, Hubbard Guidance Center, there was a log there, and people would sit on a split log waiting for their auditing session. You remember that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyway, those were days that were quite a bit different than they are today. I think you might agree with that. Do you?
Oh, yes. Certainly, the world of Scientology was an entirely different, had an entirely different feel to it back in those days. It was like the pressure wasn't there, the mad focus on money, the status, and everything is oriented towards status. It was just people who shared some sort of common interest and ideas of how to improve their lives, who happened to be in the same location. And there was a lot of fun. Like, I enjoyed the people that I met, the people that I used to hang out with, the other kids that were the quote Scientology kids, the families that we knew. Those sort of things were what Scientology represented to me. It wasn't the IAS and fundraising and we're gonna destroy this person and you have to disconnect from that person. None of that stuff ever even entered my world back in those days.
I agree. And one of the other pleasurable things when I brought my family over, do you remember there was the hill that was off to one side and it was grassy and everybody would gather there and have their lunch, and it just, what a hell of a time it was. And it's turned into something that is diametrically opposed to everything we thought or believed in those days. And it went, if you could give a good, well, I don't know if this is a good analogy, but I talk about the actual movement itself went from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. It just went rotten, and it's rotten to the goddamn core right now.
Yeah, although, there was always some rot in the core.
Well, that's right, because otherwise it couldn't grow if it wasn't there to begin with.
Right.
I remember an amusing, this is amusing now. At the time, it was a big flop. There was a guy there who was protesting, and he drove his car onto the grounds, and he put his hand on the horn and kept blowing it. Now, if this actually happened, now that would disturb people in auditing sessions. So here's this horn, bow, going off, So what the staff did, they went over to the hood of the car. They called it a bonnet in England.
Right.
They opened up the hood and they disconnected his battery. That's what they had to do to stop him from blowing the horn. And anyway, he gave up. He opened the door, and then they put his battery back together, and he drove off. But stuff like that. I mean, these days they'd probably take a machine gun and take him out.
Yeah.
In those days, it was, look, don't do that again and get out of here.
Right.
Okay, so look, we did meet at St. Hill, and I think it was in 71, and then I went back over, and your parents came back over in 73. But you did something else in 73. Could we take that up right now, Mike?
Yeah, that was when I joined the Sea Org. And I joined the Sea Org originally in Australia, but then I was going to go to the Apollo to join L Ron Hubbard. And at the time, the Apollo was in Portugal. So I went to St. Hill. as sort of the stop-off point. And when I got to St. Hill, I was told, well, you know, you can go to the Apollo, but you have to do the EPF first, the Estates Project Force. I never even heard of it. I didn't even know what that was. And as a matter of fact, the person that told me, who I met first then, was Marion Powell.
Wow.
She was the supercargo of the FOLO, as it was called then, the Flag Operation Liaison Office. So I had to do the EPF, and you know, as part of the EPF, you have to do a bunch of sec checks, which they called at the time integrity processing.
Yeah.
And the person that did my integrity processing sec checking in order to go to the Apollo was your daughter, Denise.
Wow. What a
She was
small
doing
world.
an internship or something at St. Hill. I
Wow.
guess that's when her and Dave were both training to be auditors.
Yeah. Yeah, they were. And well, I know that Denise always had a good communication cycle. I can tell you. I mean, that's my personal experience with her, you know?
Yeah, well, it was kind of funny being sec checked by someone like a girl who was younger than me.
Yeah.
And I was 18 at the time, and she was like 14 or something, I guess.
Wow.
13 maybe. Well, how old was she in 1973? She was born in 1960, right?
She was born in 1960. She'd be 13 years old.
Right.
April 30th, 1960, her and David were born. You know the twin.
Right.
Well, for the listeners, David has a twin, which is Denise. That's his twin sister.
She was my sec check.
Wow. Well, what did happen then? Did you not go to the Apollo? I thought you
No,
went.
I did. Like shortly thereafter, you know, a couple of months later, I went to the Apollo and in Lisbon at the time, and I arrived thinking that I was going there to do a training program on the OEC, the Organizational Executive Course, to return to Australia to be a Sea Org executive in Australia. And when I got there, Maria Starkey, Norman Starkey's former wife, who's now deceased, was the person in charge of personnel assignments. And she says, "Oh, you've been traded. You're going to be posted as a deckhand." And
Wow.
I'm like, "What? What does that mean?" "Oh, you're going to go and, you know, scrape paint on the outside of the ship and put caulking in the teak decks of the Apollo." I'm like, No, I'm not." "Oh yeah, you are. You're in the Sea Org now, dude. That's what happens. You got traded." That's what I was told. You were traded. I'm like, I don't even know what this means.
Well, like a slave, right?
Exactly.
They traded slaves.
That's exactly what it was, Ruddy. It was like, you are now an indentured servant. You belong to us. We own you, and you're going to do whatever we tell you to do because there is no other option. Now I'm sitting on a boat in Lisbon Harbor, and I've turned over my passport. I don't have any money. I don't have anything. I'm just, here I am. Now I'm stuck.
Wow. Jesus
Like for
Christ.
the first number of months, all I wanted to do was get off the Apollo. I did not want to be there at all.
Wow.
And you know, the first assignment that I had on the Apollo running, you're gonna love this. As a deckhand, I was considered to be one of those sort of expendable people. You know, there's always people around in the Sea Org that get used for every crap assignment that nobody else wants to do.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's like the bottom feeders, right?
Exactly. Like the guys that get told, "Oh, someone needs to go pick up the garbage in the parking lot because Tom Cruise is showing up."
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. You know,
Yep.
all the important people don't do that sort of stuff. It's the guys that can be spared. And I was one of the guys that could be spared. So you know what my first job was?
What's that?
Sitting up all night outside of the cabin where Bruce Welch was being held. Bruce
Whoa.
Welch was the pilot of the introspection rundown. In fact, Bruce Welch was the only person whoever did the introspection rundown before Hubbard announced and released it in January of 1974 as the technical breakthrough of 1974 and the final reason that psychiatry no longer need exist.
Wow.
And it was all based on one guy.
That was the entire research he did, right?
That was it. The entire thing. And Bruce Welch was this big guy, and it was terrifying to me. Here I am, I don't know anything, and I'm sitting there outside of this room, and this room has all these ropes from the door attached to the bulkhead across the hallway so that he couldn't pull the door open. And he was inside there, and he had literally torn apart a steel locker with his bare hands and stuffed it out a porthole, torn apart the bed and the mattress and stuffed it out the porthole, and spent the entire time screaming, I want a conference with the Commodore right now.
I want what?
The Commodore. LRH.
Unbelievable.
Get him down here right now. And I'm being told, you may not make a sound and don't do anything that upsets him. I'm sitting there like,
Jesus Christ, man.
And then some guys would come down to take him to the bathroom, and it would be 6 of them. Like literally 2 guys on each leg and 2 guys and guys on each arm. Wow. And he'd be like punching them and kicking them. It was like crazy. That was my first job on the Apollo.
Well, and I can see how you could be the international spokesman based on that, Mike.
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
Well.
This is unbelievable.
Okay, well then what happened was, after I performed my functions so well doing that, Hubbard decided he needed to do something about the PR area control in Portugal. And the ship was sailing between Portugal, the Azores, which are Spanish islands, Madeira, like the mainland Portugal. There were a number of ports there: Setúbal, Porto, Lisbon, and then this island in the middle of the Atlantic called Madeira, which is a Portuguese island, and then the Azores, which is Spanish, that are off the coast of Africa. It was sort of making a circuit like this. And there was all sorts of difficulties with the government in Portugal, and the Apollo, just prior to that, had been kicked out of Morocco and, escorted out of the port with gunships after having been kicked out of Spain, kicked out of Greece, kicked out of Italy. It was like this string of failures of establishing any safe operating environment. So Hubbard decided, we need to do something to ingratiate ourselves with the Portuguese government. So he decided to set up a unit in Funchal, Madeira, this little island, and that unit would do surveys on tourists, because tourism is the biggest source of funding in Portugal, to find out what they really wanted using his brilliant survey tech.
Right.
So there was a little unit set up to do surveying. There were 4 women: Jim Dincalci, who was the LRH medical officer, who had screwed up because he gave an injection to Hubbard that he did wrong. So he got, you're out, and sent to the shore unit, and me. And I was like the new kid on the block, and I was supposed to handle the telexes and the mail from the airport and that sort of stuff. And that was basically all I did. Okay. Wow. Fast forward, I was there for like 9 months. And in early 1974, I think it was April 25th of 1974, there was a revolution in Portugal. And there was a takeover by the army. And they took over the government of Spinoza and removed him, and became a military junta dictatorship in Portugal. Okay, long story short, there were all these rumors that were being spread around in Portugal at the time that the Apollo is a CIA ship. Now, for those of you that may not be familiar with this, the Apollo, even though it was Hubbard's home and the international headquarters of Scientology, was not Scientology. There was a, quote, shore story that this was the Operation and Transport Corporation, an international management consulting consortium that was operating on the Apollo, not that it was Scientology. So, and that was to protect Hubbard in some way. So there was this lie that the Apollo and all of the crew were operating on full time.
Yeah.
And that lie obviously creates suspicion and doubt. So then there started to be slogans painted on the wall, CIA, Apollo equals CIA. People thought that this was a spy ship for the CIA. And now with this new military government that the United States didn't like, they were convinced that the Apollo was a spy ship.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, so this famous incident happened in Portugal, in Funchal, Madeira, where the Apollo was. A whole bunch of people in the local town and realize Funchal, Madeira is a tiny little town on a tiny little island 1,000 miles away from mainland Portugal. It's in the middle of the Atlantic. There is nothing. Nothing. And people there are stir crazy. There's nothing to do. Literally. You're like, it's just so there's all these cafes that they have down on the main street, and everybody sits out there and drinks beer and coffee and et cetera, et cetera. All the young kids hanging out, and some guy starts going, okay, what we need to do is go down and get rid of the CIA ship that's sitting in our harbor. So they loaded up a bunch of taxis with stones, and they went down and started throwing rocks at the Apollo. I'm serious. Like, and it was called the Rock Festival. It was pretty, and they there were a whole bunch of people who had motorcycles, and they pushed them into the water, and they took the lines off the ship so that it, like, set adrift from the dock.
Wow.
Okay, but I wasn't on the ship. I was in our little office apartment above the office in the town. And I was the only one that was there.
Wow.
So the ship sails out of the harbor after being untied, and I'm left.
Jesus Christ.
The next door neighbor that lived in the same apartment building was a captain in the army there. And we had become somewhat friendly with him. Nice guy. And he comes knocking on the door, and he says, in his broken English, "There's trouble at the ship. There's trouble at the ship. Just stay here. Don't go. Don't leave." And I'm like, huh? He says, "Don't leave. Whatever you do, don't answer the door. Don't close the windows. It's trouble." And I'm like, what the fuck? What? And he says, "I'll be back. I'm going to go get a helicopter to come and pick you off the roof."
Oh, my God.
I'm like, seriously? He says, "Oh, it's big trouble, big trouble." So I close the door, I turn out all the lights, I turn the blinds, and pretty soon I start hearing this noise. And the next thing I see is 4 of those, big army trucks with the canvas backs pull up in the square outside of the apartment building, and all these soldiers jump out, like 50 soldiers with machine guns.
Jesus Christ almighty.
They surround the building. And I'm like, the soldiers are coming to get me. No, what was happening was all the protesters from the Apollo, after it sailed away, decided that they were going to come because they knew that we were attached to the Apollo. We're going to come and protest outside of the office and apartment. The office was at the bottom and the apartment was above it. So next thing, there's like 2,000 people out in the square shouting to get me out of there, and death to the Apollo and death to CIA and blah blah blah. And I'm in there and I'm being protected by the army that hates the CIA.
Wow.
And the guy hasn't come back. Like 5 hours later, he finally shows up and he says, "It'll be okay, just come downstairs. They just want to search through the office and then they'll let you go." And I'm like, okay. are you sure? He says, yeah. I've got all my men down there. Don't worry. So I go downstairs, and there's all these people coming in. They wanted to search the office. And I'm like, go ahead. There's nothing here. There's like communications course booklets.
Yeah.
Like no CIA stuff here. So he says, it'll be fine. As soon as they're done searching, you can go. Okay. He takes off. The next thing that happens is the Guardia Fiscal shows up. They're like the immigration police, the security force.
Right.
And they go, oh, you can't leave. I'm like, why not? He told me I could. Well, you don't have the appropriate authorization to leave, and we're under martial law and blah, 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 so you have to stay here. And I'm like, anyway, I eventually made it back to the Apollo, and later that night, the Apollo sailed and left Portugal and sailed across the Atlantic, intending to go to the United States. Like the plan was to arrive in Charleston, South Carolina on the Apollo.
Right.
And 12 miles offshore, there was a radio transmission from Foster Tompkins.
Right. I remember Foster.
Yeah. Father of Sterling and Justin.
Yeah.
Saying the FBI, the IRS, the DEA are waiting on the dock.
God.
So the Apollo turned around and we sailed to Bermuda.
Wow. I'll tell you, actually, you're lucky to be alive. You know that?
Wow, I'm not sure that's that. I mean, it was harrowing. I don't think it was really life-threatening. I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
It sounds like it was. I mean, look at what if somebody threw a rock and hit you on the head by accident? You'd be dead.
Yeah, but what if a piano fell out of a building while I'm walking by too, you know?
Well, that's true. That's a fascinating story. This is something I did not know happened to you.
There you go. See? Wow. I told you there'd be shit that you didn't know.
Well, that's
absolutely... Even as long as we've known each other.
I know.
I told you there was stuff that you don't know.
This is unbelievable. Now, let's spin back a little bit, though. When the first, you met LRH then, obviously, right?
Yes, I did.
What was your first impression of him when you met him the first time?
I was scared shitless.
Really?
It was like a sort of a terrifying experience. Actually, what happened was he would sit in his research room, his office on the prom deck, the top deck of the Apollo. And he would come out at like 4 o'clock in the morning and hold court with the aides and Mary Sue and whoever else was around up there in the offices that were near his office.
Right.
And, you know, he'd walk out and someone would see him and say, oh, good morning, sir, blah, blah, blah. And one of the offices that was up there was Ken Urquhart's office, the LRH personal communicator.
Right.
And every communication to Hubbard has to go through Ken Urquhart's office. So I had some communication that I was taking to Ken Urquhart, and I was running up the stairs, and I ran up the stairs without realizing, and Hubbard was standing at the top of the stairs, and I nearly ran into him.
Wow.
Like, and he looks at me, he says, well, there's someone in a hurry. Move. And he sort of stands aside, and I'm like, and everybody's looking at me like, oh my God, this guy just fucked up big time. Like, he just nearly ran into the Commodore, like, crime of all crimes.
Right.
Hubbard didn't seem to mind at all. Like, he was like, oh, you know, someone actually working, you know, doing something useful, at least running to try and get to where he was going.
No, that's.
But to me, it was like I just had an encounter with God.
Yeah.
You know, like from a very early age, Hubbard had been on such an enormously sacred pedestal in my mind and in everything. Like, it's hard for people to understand how you get indoctrinated into this idea that L Ron Hubbard has the answers to literally everything about life. Everything about you, everything about how to think, everything about how to act, everything about everything.
Yeah.
Literally, you know, the old expression, do what Ron says,
Yeah.
it is literally a mantra for Scientologists. And
Yeah.
it means he already figured out the answer. All you need to do is find out what he said about it, and you'll have the answer to whatever it is that you need to know about. And so, in the mind of a child to begin with, and then at the time I was like a teenager. This is like the guy who has the answers not just to life but to eternity.
Yeah.
So in my mind, he is someone to be revered. And though, you know, he wrote things saying, well, you know, I'm just a man and I don't want to be treated like a god, and etc., etc. Those words are pretty hollow when you actually look at the other things that he said, like keeping Scientology working, which dictates that the only answers to life are the ones that he found.
Yeah, that's right. And you were born, I mean, were your parents in Scientology when you were born?
No, they started when I was like 5 or 6.
Well, that's pretty goddamn young, though. I mean, and your whole time with them, you're being indoctrinated. And it would be like a person raised in a Catholic family being taught about Jesus Christ, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely right.
Yeah.
In fact, more. I mean, to some extent, the idea of Jesus Christ is based on just a concept and a bunch of parables and things that other people wrote about. No, Hubbard, it went beyond that. He has actually described the answers to everything about life.
Yeah.
You can't go to the lectures of Jesus Christ to find out how to handle interpersonal relationships.
No.
You can't go to the writings of Jesus Christ to tell you how to become an immortal spiritual being.
No.
You know, it's just, it's on a whole nother plane, and it's really kind of difficult for anybody that hasn't been immersed in that way of thinking to understand it.
Yeah, I see that. And I'll tell you, like, sometimes I get comments or little people writing saying, you know, how could people just be so engrossed in Scientology that you can't think otherwise? Well, it's all the indoctrination. And if you're born, well, not born until you were 5 years old, you start getting indoctrinated. That is all you know. And especially by your parents, who are your survival entities. I mean, they feed you, they clothe you, they take care of you. So you have a tendency to listen to what they have to say and believe it.
Yeah. And you know, people also often ask, well, how is it that, like, is everybody just dumb that gets involved in Scientology? Is this just a con game for the weak-minded fool of the world? And the answer to that is no. And I'm not, like, I started out without really much choice. I was a kid.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of smart people that I have an enormous amount of respect for, who got involved in Scientology way later, when they were adults.
Yeah.
But the reason is because it appeals to good people. It is designed to appeal to good people, to people who want to help other people, to people who want to help themselves, to people that believe that they have found a way of helping themselves and helping others. And that is what the pitch of Scientology is at the outset.
Well, I'll tell you, that's about what I've described it as, because I think that's the common denominator of people who are in Scientology, who are not a bunch of fucking dummies.
Right.
They mostly want to have, well, first of all, when you get in, as you just said, they want to help themselves. But you do have this feeling of wanting to help others. And that's why you'd recruit people into becoming part of this movement. Or, you know, as I did, I got many people to join this. Well, not many, but some to join the Sea Org, because I thought, okay, we could stand help to help us propagate all of our knowledge that L Ron Hubbard knows about life, so other people on this planet can be helped. So every man, woman, and child can be helped.
Right.
That's you're exactly right on that, Mike. I totally agree with you.
Okay, I'm talking too much, Ronnie. I know.
No, you're not talking.
I start rambling. I go on and on and on. But
hey, listen, they hear me every fucking week, man. You're the first time you've been on, so you're not talking too much. That's the reason I got you on. And I'll interrupt
talk a lot. You don't have to do any work.
No, but I will interrupt you when I think you're not correct. Which I'm telling you, a lot of people who interview others do that. They can't take it. Somebody doesn't agree with them. What the fuck do you have them on for? You know? So, okay. So let me ask you another question. Was that the only time you had any dealings with Hubbard?
No, I dealt with him a lot. I mean, I dealt with him on the Apollo, but not a lot. I then joined the CMO in 1976 with Ronnie, your son, and Biddy together in CMOCW. And at that point, I had a lot of communication with Hubbard directly via he was in California. But then ultimately, I went in 1976. I guess it was 76. Sometime around then, trained to be a messenger, like a watch messenger. And a watch messenger is someone that actually is with L Ron Hubbard.
Yeah.
And there was a particular, you know, it's like an apprenticeship. You got to go with some other already experienced Commodore's messenger and stand watch with them, meaning take one of the 6-hour shifts a day that you are actually with Hubbard, no matter what he's doing, whether he's taking photos, whether he's driving his car, or whether he's sitting in his office doing paperwork, you're with him to run and get people, to run and tell people things, to pick up papers, to hold his ashtray, to like whatever it was, put his fucking socks on. And so I spent a good deal of time with him under those circumstances, which is pretty unique. You know, there are not that many people who in the history of Scientology have spent that sort of time with L Ron Hubbard as a messenger. And interestingly, the large majority of them are no longer in Scientology.
Wow.
And quite a number of them are speak publicly about their lack of affection for L Ron Hubbard at this point.
Yeah,
and you know, Terry and Janice. Janice is probably the most well-known. Janice Gillum Grady. And she and her sister Terry were two of the founding messengers, and then Lois Riesdorf was another one, and Dee Dee and Gail Riesdorf were two others. It's quite a lot.
Well, what was your experience with him when you were standing watch?
It was interesting. He had he was very quick-tempered. Like things would upset him, like in a flash. On the other hand, he had a pretty good sense of humor. It wasn't he was funny. He cracked jokes. He was. Look, L Ron Hubbard was larger than life. I don't care who you are or what you think of him. He was a personality that was larger than life. I mean, he walked into a room and you knew he walked into the room. He was like one of these huge personalities that is the center of everybody's attention and wants to be the center of everybody's attention. And talks about things like in a way that everybody should be listening to him, and he's used to everybody listening to him. And
Wow.
he would expound upon everything and anything. I mean, you've listened to a lot of Hubbard's lectures, Ron.
Oh, absolutely.
What I'm talking about. Like well, I was, on the dark side of Mars is blah, 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 blah. Or and the subjects range from how do you cook a steak, or how do you change the oil in a car, to what's the nature of the universe, to how do you send a rocket to the moon, to how do you do underwater scuba diving, he expounded as an expert on everything.
Wow.
And whether he was or not is a different question. But when you're in the mindset of, as I was at the time, this is the guy who discovered that you are an immortal spiritual being and will be able to, attain godlike status and return yourself to being a spiritual being with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men, if you just do what I tell you to do. This is quite astonishing to sit with someone or be with someone who knows everything about everything. And you believe it at the time. I literally believed it. I believed that if he told me that there was the World Bank was composed of 6 men who were descendants of an alien space invader force, I would have believed it.
Yeah. No.
And it's hard to quite get a grip on that now, but it was very it was very electrifying being around him.
Yeah.
He was an electrifying personality, and you were on your toes all the time. And you're also worried that he was able to perceive things that nobody else was able to perceive, like even your thoughts and what you were planning and what your intentions were, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's like a very interesting experience.
I'll bet it was. And I'll tell you, I can understand how you felt, because, I mean, mind you, I didn't get into Scientology till I was 33 years old. But I did develop that mindset that I believed everything that he said. And it takes a little bit of doing to look in the mirror one day and say, hey, wait a minute. I think I've been fooled is the mild word. Conned would be the real word,
Fucked could be another word.
What's that?
Fucked could be another word.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, but you have to come to that awareness to get out of that, because these little datums or truths, quote unquote, that you accept, you built up kind of a template in your mind, and you operate within that template, which is actually a prison in your own mind that keeps you locked in to believing that what you're doing is going to help everybody, and you don't want to get out of it because you'd be in treason to mankind, kind of,
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's why Larry writes book, Going Clear, The Prison of Belief.
Yeah.
And that it's hard to get people to understand that, you can put up fences and put razor wire on them and have guards and cameras and motion sensors and detectors, et cetera, but ultimately the thing that keeps people where they are is in their head,
Exactly.
not the physical. Because if you get out of the mindset, you can escape, and you're proof of that, and I'm proof of that, and Tom and Amy and your son Ronnie, and like everybody has proven that it's possible.
Yeah.
If your mind gets shaken loose.
That's exactly right. And that's where I had to come to the conclusion. Of course, you didn't, and all of us did. Mark Headley, Claire Headley. And it's interesting, though, that your experience with him was so, as you called it, electrifying, because there are people. Well, okay, I'm not going to get into my opinion because this is your show at this point. I'm glad we brought it up.
Wow. So what am I doing next week? Who am I interviewing next week?
No. Hey, no, I got you on to hear what you have to say.
Oh, I get it.
Okay, there you go.
I misunderstood you there. I thought you were turning over to me.
No.
I can't play the trumpet. I'm learning to play the piano, Ron.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do.
I'm taking piano lessons.
Oh, really?
I'm serious. I'm dead serious. I am taking piano lessons because my biggest regret from my childhood is that I didn't learn to play a musical instrument. I actually have two. I didn't learn to play a musical instrument, and I didn't learn to speak another language fluently.
Well, I can tell you, the piano is the perfect instrument because you can see chord formations where your fingers are on the keys. And I think that's a big advantage to somebody who just plays a single note instrument. You follow me, Mike?
Yeah, I do.
You're seeing the melody.
I'm really crappy, Ron. But it's like I practice and I'm trying to learn, and I started like 3 weeks ago.
No, keep practicing. And here's what to do as an example. If you're going to learn how to play a scale, do it like this. And then do it this way, slower. Like that. Two people not knowing each other told me that datum. If you want to learn how to play something, play it slower and slower yet, and you'll learn it faster than by trying to play it at the tempo it was written at.
Gotcha. I'll put that wonderful advice to use.
It's mind-boggling because you're a fast-thinking person, and to be doing it slow, you think I'm wasting my time. You're not. But I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to have a little cultural enrichment time here right now, okay? And I'm going to teach you how to play the trumpet.
No, thanks.
No, I'm going to teach our audience. You ready? Here's what you do. You blow in here, and you press these up and down, and that's how you play a trumpet. So now the next time, the musician union call for a trumpet player, you can get a gig and make some extra money. So watch the show. You're going to learn skills,
Now I know how to play the trumpet.
You got it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, back on planet Earth. Here we go. Okay. Now let's switch over a little bit to, and I wouldn't call him the successor, but the guy who took over when L Ron Hubbard died. When was the first time you met David?
Whenever he first joined the Sea Org, I guess that was like 1976 or 5 or something.
Well, it was 76 because he joined when he was 16 years old.
Okay, 1976 when he first arrived, because at that time, I had been appointed by L Ron Hubbard as the external comm aide. I was in charge of all of the telex traffic and all of the mail freight in Scientology. There was this thing called the LRH External Comm, or LEC. And that was the little unit of people who delivered communications to Hubbard. At the time, Hubbard was living in Dunedin, just north of Clearwater,
right,
in an apartment complex called the King Arthur Courts. It's still there. Nobody knew where Hubbard was. It was all a big secret. He was like always very secret about where he was. But the little LRH external comm unit would package up these little packages, and then someone would come and collect them and take them to him, like one of the messengers or Mike Douglas or various other people. Dave was assigned to that unit. That unit was next door to the external comm. There was a connecting door. So I first met him when he was working in LRH external comm.
Wow. I didn't even know he worked in external comm.
Well, it was sort of it was part of the personal office of LRH or the CMO. I don't even know how it was organized, but yeah, it was like the flunky level start out position for someone who ultimately was going to end up in the Commodore's messenger role.
Well, how was he when you first met him?
I don't have like much of a recollection of that time. Just he was sort of a nobody at that point.
Yeah.
You know, I knew and became very, very close friends, as you know, with your son Ron.
Yeah, I know that.
And I was always much closer to Ronnie, as I always called him. You know, now I call you Ronnie sometimes, but it was always, you were always Ron and he was always Ronnie to me. And I was, you know, my growing interaction with Dave really happened because of my friendship with Ronnie, rather than interaction on like interaction due to our positions in Scientology. So I came to know him, and you know, to begin with, he was like Ronnie's little brother.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, that was kind of how I knew him. He was like Ronnie's little brother guy, and then he went to CMO. Dave went to CMO International, and I was in the Commodore's messenger on Clearwater, and he then started being kind of in a senior position to me.
Yeah. And
that was when he started being an asshole.
Really?
Like when he went to CMO International, like he originally went and was on the film, the shoot crew and blah, 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 blah. But when he became the action chief of CMO International was when he started really becoming the assertive, forceful personality on display that ultimately grew as time went by.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's when he started to get some power, because I've often mentioned on the show. As a matter of fact, I mentioned in my book that, and you know, Lord Acton, I quote the guy who come up with this statement because it's worthy to give credit. He said, power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And there's never been a truer datum that I've ever heard in my life, because it's observable, not only with David, but with other people.
Oh, yeah.
Just absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, I didn't know Dave when he was a kid, and I don't know and understand all of the things that develop in someone or what factors go into creating their personalities. But I do know without a doubt that his personality type is today a sociopath.
Yeah.
He is a sociopath. I've read the books on it. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist, but I've read enough books and articles that I check off the characteristics and go, yep, that describes him to a T.
Yeah.
Was he always like that? I don't know. I remember you telling me stories about what he was like when he was a kid and how sick he was, and you know that he always was, you know, small and kind of fighting to be like everybody else and be accepted, or in the football team the same as everybody else, etc., etc. And you know, I don't know, and I don't care to really try and figure out or analyze how he came to be what he is. I believe that there are some fundamental personality traits that people just have. I also believe that Dave is the perfect product of the think and attitude of L Ron Hubbard.
Wow.
I think he epitomizes what Hubbard describes and lays out as the ideal Sea Org member.
Wow. Expand on it a little bit, because this is a major point. You know that what you're bringing up now, this is something that nobody has brought up before, Mike.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because to say that he is the ideal Sea Org member, that would be, yeah, that's like a new thought on this program.
Okay.
Just
Well,
go into a little description of it, please.
what I mean by that, Ron, is that he epitomizes the characteristics that Hubbard said were so important to leadership, to being a Sea Org member, to commanding respect, to controlling your environment. And those concepts are Hubbard concepts that are very, very ingrained into at least life in the Sea Org. I mean, you're supposed to be tough. You're supposed to not care about people's excuses or worry about whether they can or can't do a job. They're just supposed to be expected to do it. There's no empathy. I mean, no empathy is a condition that Hubbard believed was a very, very pro-survival state of affairs. Like, if you don't have empathy or sympathy, you are more likely to be surviving than the person that has sympathy and empathy. And in the Sea Org, that everything about Scientology, all the things that are like the worst parts of Scientology are distilled into the Sea Org. The Sea Org is where you rise to the top based on your ruthlessness, your willingness to forego everything else about life, family, friends, other interests or hobbies, desire, anything that takes away from that very narrow focus of I am going to achieve the objectives of Scientology is unacceptable in the Sea Org. And the more you are able to be focused like that, the better Sea Org member you are. The more you're able to have an enormous number of the characteristics of a sociopath, the better you are as a Sea Org member. Ronnie, wow. If you go look down the list of characteristics of a sociopath, the standard characteristics, you know, they never feel blame. They don't regret their decisions. Like all of these things, you will see that those are the things that are held up as being, this is what a good Sea Org member is. And that's what it is.
Mike, I'm telling you, you're 100% right. I never entertained that exact thought. That's that is a new thought. And wow.
There you go. Come to me for new thoughts.
Oh boy, I'll tell you, man. But it's true though. And like if you were to read Antisocial Characteristics, or I like the Martha Stout book, the one Sociopath Next Door.
That's brilliant.
I know. And the one thing she has in there that is not in Hubbard's writings is that the sociopath does not have a conscience.
Right.
And that is the one marker that if you can spot that in somebody, watch it. You're liable to get fucked over by this person.
Right. And Ronnie, I'm telling you, Sea Org members are not supposed to have consciences.
I know. That's why I'm saying, look, I was in there. It's not like I read about this some fucking place, all right? So I know what you're talking about is true, but it's a brand new look at it. You know, I'm going to tell you something, Mike. We're running into the witching hour here, and I want to take up some subjects that I don't want to, you know, just say a couple words, have you say a couple of words about them. Please, could I have you back?
Of course, Ronnie. I love talking to you. You know, when we get on the phone, it goes sometimes.
Okay, because I'll tell you, I want to find out how you got into OSA, how you became the international spokesman, your thoughts on the tax-free exemption that the church got, and about disconnection. There's a lot of things I'd like to cover, but I want to give you the time to go over them because this has been very enlightening for me personally, and for our audience. It's a real present. It's a real gift that you brought up here that I got you on. And I'll take full credit for getting you on. Okay, my producer is trying to get my attention. What's up, Sean?
Yeah, a couple questions.
We have a couple questions. Do you mind, Mike?
No.
Okay, go on.
Okay. So FYT for $5 says you want to know about David Miscavige's daily life. Where does he live? Who's his entourage? Things like that.
Do you want to handle that, Mike? You can.
Yeah, I mean, they could ask you that question just as good as me, but and frankly, today I don't really know for certain. Back when I was around, like up until 2007, Dave lived between Gold, which he doesn't go there anymore, as far as I understand, his apartment next to Author Services, and his apartment at the Hacienda Gardens in Clearwater. And then there was rooms for him at St. Hill and in Europe and, various other places. But those were the primary places he lived. And his entourage consisted of Shelley, always, was with him all the time.
Yep.
And Lou, always. Larice Stuckenbrock was with him all the time.
Right.
And then there was a collection of people that sort of provided various services to him.
Yeah.
Georgiana Irons, Valerie Light, just a kind of people.
Yeah, well, that's what basically I know too. And he had a chef. I think the guy's handle was Frenchie.
Yeah, he replaced Sinner. Sinner was his chef originally, Sinner Palmer, who was L Ron Hubbard's chef. And then Frenchie took over, whoever that guy was. I didn't even know who he was.
Yeah, well, I met him, and he was very nice.
And, Stephen Price would follow him around to do his back adjustments. And, just...
He had the entourage.
Levon was the hairdresser.
And what now?
Levon used to cut his hair, and Mr. Lim made his clothes, and John Lobb made his shoes.
Wow.
Shoes at $1,500 a pair.
Yeah.
And that was a discounted price, sir, probably $2,000. So he gave me.
Have you ever been to that store in London? John Lobb & Co.?
No, I've never been there.
Next time you're in London, Ronnie, go there. It's astonishing.
I'd love to go there.
Nothing's changed since Charles Dickens strolled out of the door.
I'll bet because there was a fish and chip shop in East Grinstead, and the same people that were working there when I went there like 30 years later,
Okay, next question.
Next.
Karen Cookson just for $20 says thank you for all you're doing to both of you. It's Karen. Thanks, Karen.
Well, Karen, I want to give you an acknowledgement for that. And I can speak for Mike. I'll tell you, it's something that we both want to do. It's not something that we've been assigned or somebody said, hey, you better do something about it. No, this is a self-determined decision. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate very much your acknowledging that. And thank you for.
And something I just want to say, Ronnie, is that the people who are out there that support your channel, my blog, the Aftermath show, Ortega, wherever, they are incredibly valuable.
I know that.
It is what makes it all worthwhile.
Yep.
When I get a comment on my blog or an email or something on Twitter that says, I just wasn't aware of what was going on, or even better is, oh my God, I used to be believing that this was my only path, and now I've found the truth, and or I reconnected with my family member. Whatever. That's what makes this worth doing.
Yep, you're right, Mike. And I'm thankful for the same thing, buddy. Go on.
Open My Eyes 67 for 20 says thank you for all you do. We are all behind you. It's nice. Spider Fight $2.
No, wait. Let's acknowledge that, because
absolutely.
When I get a comment like that, I start to choke up a little, because it's as I said just a minute ago, it's something that I want to do, and Mike feels the same way, I'm sure.
Yep.
Really. They Call Me Drums asks, was LRH as brutal in applying Scientology as David? How much does David personally benefit from the money he raised? So we just talked about him having a shoemaker. So
yeah, he lives a lavish life, a very Well, the life of a guy who has millions of dollars, I'd say. Wouldn't you say that, Mike?
Yeah, sure, but understand, he doesn't need to have it personally. I mean, he does have personal money, but he doesn't need to have it personally, and realizes it's a liability to have it personally because the IRS could come after him. He can snap his fingers and has $3 billion at his disposal.
I know.
That's the best of all worlds. You don't need, and truthfully, you know, people ask this all the time. Well, how come the IRS didn't go after him? You know that religions in the United States have got a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
You know, the leaders of some of these, like Creflo Dollar and those sort of guys, Joel Osteen, they live in 10,000 square foot homes and have their own private jets.
Yeah.
But personally, and it's acceptable to the IRS. So the real issue with David and how he lives, which is sort of the same issue as L Ron Hubbard, is there is one person who lives like a king and everybody else lives like a pauper.
You're right.
And that's what, and supposedly everybody is here on the same terms. We're all Sea Org members together. We all have the same commitment, except for one. Originally, it was Hubbard, who lived very lavishly. And it's okay to live lavish. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're not insisting that everybody else live like a shit eater.
Yeah,
and that's the difference.
I won't add anything to that because that's the truth. Go on.
Y'all ain't right says for $20 says thank you so much for everything, especially the trumpet lesson. There was some
well, at least she was watching.
See, there's one person who appreciates me being a teacher.
Yeah. There was some good questions of conversation about Tommy Davis. What happened to Tommy Davis?
Well, he's out of there right now. He says he's on leave from the Sea Org. That's bullshit, man.
Yeah, he blew it.
He blew, and he's working a real estate business, or I don't know, maybe guessing.
That's a long story.
I don't even want to get into that
one.
Yeah. I mean, he could be guessing weight at carnivals. I don't know. I don't care.
Well, and the other one is I don't even know if Mike can comment on this about the Danny Masterson episode.
Do we want to even get into that?
It's still to be determined when.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, if it was just my decision, it would have been a year ago. So.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for watching. And continue to watch. Become a Patreon. You can become part of the team that's doing something about it, just like that. And follow Mike on his blog. Something can be done about it. And I'll look forward to having you on again, and that's going to be announced. Okay, Mike?
All right, buddy.
And I appreciate you coming on, buddy. Thanks a lot. So this is Life After Scientology. I'm Ron Miscavige, and see you on the next episode. Bye-bye now.